All right, and we are live. Hello, once again, everybody, to this series on exposing the utter atrocity that is Hydee Feldstein Soto, the current presiding city attorney of Los Angeles, and of course, her dynamic duo partner in absolute failure, Nathan Hochman, who is the presiding district attorney, who was actually just recently sworn into office late last year and has been in the office now for about 9 months. So he's coming up on his first year. And what I want to talk about today is I actually want to take just for a second. We'll revisit the situation, but just for 1 second, I want to actually dive into some history regarding Nathan Hochman and the way that he currently runs things in Los Angeles, and just what it is that his vision, right, his strategy, his overall push for the city of Los Angeles is, and sort of explain some of the things that, is Nathan Hochman, for example, good for the city of Los Angeles? Is he been of any help? Is he actually dedicated? Is he willing to step up to the task? And so those are the things we're going to talk about today. I just want. So those are the things we're going to talk about. All right, we got some good sound coming in. Just wanted to verify that. So right off the bat, if you don't know, the predecessor to Nathan Hochman was DA George Gascon, and there's a little bit of information in history that you really need to know about George Gascon before I dive any further. So George himself was actually started out his entire career in the law as a regular beat cop. He was a deputy for about 17 years, rose through the ranks of sergeant and eventually detective. While on the force, ended up going to law school, then became a prosecutor, and through that path, then he eventually ran for office for the district attorney of Los Angeles, and eventually won. And he held that term just before Nathan Hochman. And George is he's a very controversial figure, just because, for one thing, he does what I think any good prosecutor should do, which is actually come from the streets himself, actually have real life experience on what the law on the actual ground looks like as far as enforcement and what it's actually doing to people, versus just litigating from afar and being in a shielded environment where your decisions, really, you have no way of telling what they've done to real people and to their lives, and whether certain policies you have are actually good for your constituents, or whether the way that your office is behaving is actually causing far more harm than it is good, both in the short and long term. And that's something quite unique that George Gascon had. Despite what you want to say about the guy, he had a good head on his shoulders. He knew what the reality was on the actual streets. He worked as a cop for a very, very long time, and he did it the right way. He had the field experience, then he went to school while on the force, became a prosecutor so he could apply his real world strategies and tactics. And he was equal parts sort of a visionary, in that he was quite an idealist, but also a realist in some senses. He understood that LA has an absolutely horrific and disgusting history with over prosecution, with extremely crowded jails, and the vast majority of the people are not in there for violent offenses. In fact, he knew from his years as a field officer, from all the schooling he was able to go through, as well as direct life experience, that the vast majority of the people coming through catching cases were really non-violent offenders who were victims of poverty. But not just any poverty. Gascon knew quite well that the poverty at play here was actually much, much more sinister than people would imagine. The poverty that we're talking about is actually a deliberate, a systemic poverty that is artificially created and created by a government that has abandoned its people for decades now, abandoned any sort of care or interest for the well-being of its constituents, and frankly seems to have zero remorse for continuing to harm them even further. And so it's within this context that sort of an idealist and a realist at the same time, a guy like Gascon takes office. And you got to understand that he's up against a institution that refuses to change. He understands that there is culture frozen in decades and decades past, where the only real way you're going to have any sort of impact, if any at all, is you really got to shock it back into life. You got to shock it into acknowledging your existence. And he was able to really do that in a powerful way when the first moment he took office, he came out with these special directives that took the city and the whole county aback. But the people who supported him absolutely expected it, and even others who were very big critics of his supported and understood his position when it came to some of these special directives. And I'll give you a rundown of some of these. So one of the first things that Gascon actually had as a special directive to his office is in regards to cash bails. And so for a lot of pretrial release policy, for pretty much every case when it's in the pretrial stages, he eliminated the presumption of a cash bail for most cases, particularly ones where there were no violent offenses, where there was no capital harm, no crimes of moral turpitude. So we're talking about, capital grape, where we're talking about, head lead gangsters. Those people count, whereas people that were, peddling some very small level of narcotics and were clearly, just another rookie grunt for a bigger enterprise, they didn't catch heat, okay? They didn't have a forced bail put on them, which ultimately most of these folks couldn't pay anyway. And so you understood that the system is really not suited for prosecuting the actual ringleaders of these criminal enterprises, and vast majority of the time it goes after useless rookies that have no real insight into how the whole organization is structured, who's running it, who's getting the money, how it's coming in, how they're cleaning it, and so on. Another one that he actually had was regarding misdemeanor case management. And so basically for him, and this is actually directly tied to some of the Scientology stuff, when it came to low-level misdemeanor or cases, or even ones that had been wobbled up, like disturbing the peace, trespassing, unlicensed driving, he had ordered his staff to err on dismissing these cases outright with extremely narrow exceptions. And he essentially moved even more aggressively in that front to cap plea offers to avoid excessive jail time, and instead emphasize community labor and diversion and treatment programs over fees, over jailing, and so forth. He was a guy that really believed that rehabilitation is possible, and he understood scientifically that the vast majority of the people, both in jail and in prison, were not violent offenders. The vast majority of them committed low-level offenses that predominantly came out of poverty. And as such, the need is really to survive. And so that's why they stumble across peddling drugs, That's why they stumbled across, getting involved in a gang, but not really taking part in any of their murder rituals and so forth, doing it more so just as another form of an income rather than, actually being part of the gang culture and wanting to aspire to be some sort of top dog and so forth. So that's George Gascon. And in fact, in every felony case that was brought forward in the past year and a half against people like Cameron Marino, aka LA Cam, the felony case that was brought against Danny, the felony case that was originally brought against Scott, Josiah, those cases were dismissed at the behest of George Gascon. He personally stepped in and dismissed those cases outright. And you got to understand how this works. When the prosecutor's office actually files charges, it works two ways. So one way is the DA, his or herself, files the charges and moves them on through, and that's a case. Another way is that the management internally will vote on a consensus and they'll meet usually weekly. Sometimes they can meet daily depending on however they want to address it. It's quite a bureaucratic process, but they essentially come together to vote on whether they want to bring forward a certain case with certain charges. And if the management come together and agree on majority consensus, then they file it. And then, of course, the DA has veto power to outright dismiss the case and or order the deputies to also move to dismiss the case. And that's exactly what happened with each and every felony case in the last year involving any of the Scientology activists. George Gascon was quite aware at how utterly stupid, ridiculous, and idiotic the cases being brought forward for prosecution. In fact, it was his deputies that were super gung-ho to prosecute cases that were utterly meritless, clearly done as political favors. The various deputies that were bought off internally. And it's not just in his office, it's also in Hydee's office where the same thing holds, except the most interesting thing in Hydee's office is that she too is quite gung-ho and aggressive and willing to file malicious, selective political cases for a child trafficking cult. She has proven herself time and time again to do so without a single care in the world, and she will absolutely keep doing it again so long as she's a prosecutor. And so that's the backdrop that we have with George, and why it was relatively, as far as cases and charges went in the last year, that's why it was quite peaceful, because George Gascon kept the peace. He was a man who understood the reality. He was a man that understood the deep institutional fuck-ups that is LA and how utterly corrupt it is. And most importantly, he really understood that the things that LA needs to be tough on, if you want to talk about the whole tough on crime persona that Nathan Hochman ran on, which he didn't really run on, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But George Gascon realized and understood very well that the tough on crime part is actually not to do with any of the stereotypical things that people see or feel or perceive that LA is not prosecuted. And in fact, they do prosecute petty theft, vandalism, and other, non-violent cases all the time and up the wazoo, far too excessively. George Gascon understood that the real cases you got to go after and the real issues in LA, both the city and county, are by and large the officials within these systems who have gotten away with so much, who have abused their positions, abused their perceived and actual immunity to get away with absolutely disgusting and heinous crimes. Particularly law enforcement that felt like they could do whatever they wanted and walk away totally scot-free. And Gascon understood that that's the real crux, that's the real issue poisoning Los Angeles. And so that's the area that he tried to focus on and provide some measure of relief with his special directives to the impoverished, which are by and large the vast majority in LA. By and large, those are the people that are being prosecuted with totally trumped up charges that don't need to be so heavy-handed. And in fact, again, most of them were non-violent offenders. He also took quite a big stance when George was in power. So he abolished the death penalty and even submitted for review many prior cases that were pushed for the death penalty. Again, very, very much a culture shock to the disgustingly overcharged institution that is Los Angeles, that's really willing to prosecute everybody but the real criminals. And the real criminals in Los Angeles are, by and large, the government officials who have bled the city dry from liability payouts as well as the rampant fraud and embezzlement, particularly through the real estate scams that they launch under the guise of alleviating poverty and helping the homeless, when in fact they use these front groups as nonprofits to give the perception that they're doing work, when in reality those are just mechanisms to launder the money, make it look clean, make it look like you have something to show for stealing the taxpayer's dollar, and then eventually lining the hands and pockets of private special interest groups that really are in a giant racket to steal public assets like land, be it in the form of parks, rec centers, and so forth, and claim that you're building some sort of housing shelters, when in reality you do nothing of the sort. And I want to move on to the real big gripe I have with Nathan Hochman and why he's such a danger, an exceptionally large danger right now, and why it's truly scary, quite frankly, for people to even consider uttering the term protest overall in Los Angeles. And the reason for that is because you need to understand the history of Nathan Hochman, how he got to where he is today, where he was before, and what we can expect from him. And the first thing you need to understand is the election. We'll just start off on the election and we'll move sort of back from there. Nathan Hochman received millions of dollars in PAC money from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Association, which is the union for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. The reason for that is because Nathan Hochman defended the most horrific criminal sheriff that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department ever had. And that man is named Lee Baca. Lee Baca ruled with an absolute iron fist. He has committed some of the most heinous acts while in power as the Los Angeles sheriff. He did everything you could imagine, from the creation of gangs to the sanctioning and blessing of essentially inmate cockfights, to all sorts of other disgusting behavior and atrocities and abuses committed inside the LA County jail systems, all across the board, from the male to the female to the juvenile centers. Lee Baca did not discriminate. He was willing to do whatever it took to basically see people in agony, people in pain, people suffer, because he knew that he could get away with it with his position of power. Nathan Hochman defended him when Lee Baca was eventually criminally prosecuted and convicted for obstruction of justice and a couple of other charges, where Lee Baca actually would send sheriff's deputies to threaten to kill, harass, and otherwise harm the FBI investigators that were actually tasked with investigating and convicting Lee Baca. This is the kind of man that Lee Baca was, and this is the kind of person that Nathan Hochman decided not only to defend, but Nathan deliberately left. He actually worked as a U.S. attorney before this. He deliberately left his position as prosecutor specifically to defend Lee Baca when nobody else would take the role as his lead defense counsel. Lee Baca made everybody in LA so terrified that virtually nobody would run against him because they knew how utterly dangerous of a gang member and criminal that he was. Lee Baca is by far the most notorious and infamous in the worst possible way sheriff that LA County has ever had. But not only that, Hochman and his firm also represented Lee Baca's undersheriff, Paul Tanaka. And Paul Tanaka was frankly just as bad as Lee Baca. He was Lee Baca's right-hand man, where Lee Baca would order Paul Tanaka to carry out much of this abuse and harassment and threatening of, be it FBI agents, inmates, and so forth. And the funniest part about Paul Tanaka is that he's admitted to not only the existence of deputy gangs, but to the assistance of the creation of deputy gangs, the giving of money and resources to those gangs, as well as even having been a part of a gang himself and even tattooing the gang logo on his ankle. And that's why there's this funny meme that goes around with Paul Tanaka when Todd Rogers was making his round to throw his hat in the ring to be the next LA sheriff. During a press conference, Todd Rogers looked the press in the face and said, "I have nothing to hide. I'll show my ankle proudly." And he would turn to Paul Tanaka and say, "Could you do the same?" And that's such a powerful moment because it shows, and Todd Rogers is a whole other story. I'm not even going to get into Todd Rogers today, but this is the kind of level of absolute fuckery that we're dealing with when we talk about the LA Sheriff's Department, which, by the way, is the largest sheriff's department in all of America. So we're not talking about a small agency here at all. We're talking about an extraordinarily large agency that has immense power, shitloads of money behind it, and was found so incredibly dangerous that the only thing they could do, they being the county, to actually suppress some of this violence and organized crime on their part is to have the Board of Supervisors just severely cut their funding to essentially try bleeding them dry and starving them with issues like having severe shortage of staff because they won't pay for recruitment or other resources. And so, the unfortunate part is when you have such a large criminal racket, really cutting the money supply is your best and only option to actually address those issues and start the true process of reforming and getting the gangs to be dispersed and actually hopefully eventually prosecuted. But we know for a fact that Nathan Hochman won't do that because Nathan Hochman received millions of dollars in campaign money from the LASD Association, which is the union, with the ticket that, hey, we know you're a friend of ours, we'll put you in this spot, but in return, you don't prosecute any of our buddies. And if you take a look at some of the reporting that's been out there, I know the LA Times has covered this. I know that William Good has also covered this as well. There's been deputies that have committed just blatant criminal acts. One had actually broken a man's arms for no reason, extraordinarily excessive force, just cause, all on video, and Hochman said there's no crime here. We're not going to prosecute. Hochman will not go after what and do what LA needs to have done, which is prosecute the deep-seated government corruption. He will not prosecute sheriff's deputies. He will not prosecute corrupt city council members. He will not prosecute corrupt mayors or their staffers, as well as the staffers of city council members. He will not do any of that. He will not prosecute corporations, particularly developers that are involved in this whole homeless fraud racketeering scheme. He won't do it. Okay? He will not do it. He will toe that line. It will get worse under his watch. And the funniest part that I find is the history of crime in LA, particularly, is showing has shown for quite some time now an actual significant decline in violent crimes. And so more and more, the types of crimes that are being seen are non-violent offenses, offenses that have no sort of moral turpitude involved with it. These are people, by and large, that are getting stuck in the cycle of poverty. And Nathan Hochman is here to make damn sure that they stay stuck, and that the people that are responsible for the institutional aspect of creating that whole system of poverty stay in power and do not get prosecuted. And if you actually take a look at his website here, I was pulling it up and doing some research earlier, and I wanted to see what sort of policies does he actually have. Like, okay, I get it. You're the new DA. Sure. The DA is always known when they take office to issue what are called special directives, just like I was mentioning earlier with George Gascon, which is they're setting the policy for their office, right? They're saying, I'm here. I know there's certain laws, but fuck that. I have my way of doing things, and this is what we're going to do this time around. And the funniest part about Nathan Hochman is that he has no goddamn policies, no goddamn special directives at all. And his only, if you want to even call it that, his only special directives are which are the same as his campaign trail, which is, hey guys, vote for me because I'm not George Gascon. Hey guys, I'm not George. So how about you vote for me? Hey, by the way, guess what? My name is not George Gascon. How about you vote for me? And that's who Nathan Hochman is. That's ultimately his entire office in one sentence. I'm not George Gascon. Nothing about what he's actually going to do. Nothing about the real issues that Los Angeles is experiencing. Nothing about the ever-increasing deep-seated corruption, and nothing to address the vast criminal rings that are 100% sanctioned, rubber-stamped, and approved by the city and the various other cities neighboring LA. His entire ideology, policy, and otherwise practice can be boiled down to, I'm not George Gascon. And this moron, the only thing he's done in office so far is simply just repeal all of the special directives that George Gascon had instituted. He hasn't said any new ones. Okay, he hasn't gone against anything else. And all of his press conferences, just like Hydee, has this incessant need to keep saying, look, I'm a Jewish Latina and the first ever a Latina to ever assume the office of the city attorney. Frankly, nobody gives a shit. They want to see, are you actually going to go after the real criminals? Are you actually going to keep our people safe? And if not, why the hell not? And that's exactly what Nathan Hochman can never answer, because he personally has no real answer for that. He genuinely has no fucking clue what he's doing. He has no policy other than, I don't like George Gascon. He has no competency. And that's clear, and I've been posting on Twitter about this repeatedly for the past 2 weeks, where this guy can't even file a simple, stupid witness list in court. When Nathan Hochman was defending Lee Baca during the trial period, he was reprimanded by the judge because he showed up to the day of trial. It was his turn to cross-examine witnesses as well as introduce new ones. And this man didn't even submit the list of witnesses he was going to use. He started rambling on some useless crap talking about, well, I talked to some guy once at band camp and they said, yay, man, that sounds kind of cool, I guess. And the judge said, no, we're not doing that. I want a real list. You're going to get me the full list of who exactly you're going to use. And we're going to make sure the other side sees it. And we're going to make sure it's filed on the court docket. You're not going to just pull a fast one and say it verbally. You're going to file an official, formal witness list. And until you do, we're not going to do anything. So go file and go make up your list and file it and give a copy to the court and give a copy to the prosecutors. And that's how we're going to run things. We're going to run a tight, clean ship. No buffoonery at all. No tolerance for any sort of nonsense. But that's who Nathan Hochman is. This guy is an utter scumbag who is bought and paid for by the biggest crime ring that there is in LA County right now, which is bar none, the sheriff's deputy gangs that are utterly decimating the streets of LA as well as the jails, still to this day. And even worse is that the sheriff's election is coming up, and wouldn't you know it, Villanueva is throwing his hat in the ring to run for sheriff. Villanueva was the predecessor of Robert Luna, and if you don't know who the hell or what the hell Villanueva is or did, Villanueva was the guy that has repeatedly gone on every news conference, every public hearing, and been adamant that sheriff's deputy gangs do not exist. When in literal court records, we have outright admission from the two top head guys of the LASD that ran the LASD for decades, admitting outright that yes, they exist, yes, we helped create them, and yes, we're a part of them. Holy shit. This is the guy that's running and competing against Robert Luna. Now, I don't like Robert Luna. He's not perfect, but goddamn, LASD needs Robert Luna because at least he admits that deputy gangs are real, that they're major harm, and at the very least, we have a guy that has somewhat of a sane head on his shoulders. But we'll see. But back to Nathan Hochman. This is the kind of scumbag that is in position right now. Both an absolute moron and a guy that will not prosecute the real criminals. He will not go after corrupt cops, both on the LAPD side or on the sheriff's deputy. He won't do it. But what he will do is throw trumped up charges against anybody that goes after any of his political backers. He absolutely 100% will overcharge the crap out of you. And he's created this this culture and environment of absolute utter incompetence, stupidity, and idiocracy in the DA's office. It's why when we've seen some of these case hearings where the judges are utterly pissed off with the prosecutors for bringing forward stupid cases that are a giant waste of the taxpayer dollars, a giant waste of the judges' times. And they look at them and they look at the streets and say, why the hell are you not bringing in those people, but you're bringing in this crap to my court? And so this is who Nathan Hochman is. He's frankly just a shell. He has no real identity. His whole identity is, I'm not George Gascon. And so therefore, that's it. That's what you get. That's Nathan Hochman. And of course, Nathan Hochman, goes side by side with what I call the incompetence extraordinaire, Hydee Feldstein Soto, who has an absolutely long-standing, proven track record of going to the nines and doing any and all political favors for Scientology, right? The dynamic dumb duo, as I call them. The two idiot prosecutors that have no business being a prosecutor, where you have Hydee, who had her entire career was just a banking lawyer. No experience whatsoever prosecuting, no experience on being a beat cop like George was, no real world actual experience on what actually happens on the front lines, who the people are most affected are, and how crappy laws or and lack of government accountability are actually leading to all of the issues that people talk about when they talk bad about LA. Because the fact of the matter is, the people in LA and the overall environment in LA is actually quite a beautiful thing. They're very welcoming people. The problem is that the government has abandoned its people for decades now, and they will not hold their own accountable. The only times we've seen big corruption cases even come forward to hold people accountable have been exclusively at the federal level. And even there, they haven't done true justice. They've picked apart some low-hanging fruit and thrown them as the front people under the bus and pretended like they've, stopped corruption in LA. And look, we've prosecuted Weezer. But the guy was a peon and just a henchman in the much, much bigger ring, which is the trillion and billion dollar sanctioned fraud by the hands of people like Hydee, her office, and now the district attorney's office led by Nathan Hochman. At least with George, he understood that was the case and refused to take on these stupid cases. But Nathan Hochman and Hydee Soto are absolutely not going to be willing to do any of that. They will 100% go after you over the dumbest and smallest thing. They will 100% try to make an example of you. And probably the most telling out of this is when you actually look at one of the, he calls them the blueprint for justice. It's utter crap, but he talks about restoring some sort of hardcore gang unit, which was downsized and renamed. The hardcore gang unit that he's actually talking about has direct ties to the very, very infamous Crash Rampart unit, which, if you don't know what the hell that is one of the most notorious gang units that you had gang violence and the peddling of dope all committed by law enforcement officers onto the people, where they were the traffickers and they were the violent offenders, and they were working hand in hand with entire gang rings. And that's the kind of crap that Nathan Hochman thinks is okay to bring back. This guy has no clue what he's doing, and he's just a puppet for the true violent offenders, as well as the government institutionalists that are trying to bring the whole weight of the system down on people, keep the cycle of poverty going, and just make life that much harder for Angelenos. And he ran on a red wave that, as the Trump era got some fame, he said, well, I'll just run as the Republican guy, even though when you take a look at his policies, his character, his history, this guy is... He's hollow. He's as limp as a linguine noodle. I mean, this guy's he's a faker. He's a punk, and he's got nothing going for him, really. He shouldn't be in the DA's office, and it's a damn shame on what he's doing with the office. But what I wanted to circle back to towards the last part of the stream is I wanted to talk about some of the other issues and some of the history with Hydee, and some of the people that are direct victims that many of us know in this entire movement that have been part of it for the last year or so. And how, again, when I say proven track record, this is what I'm talking about. Hydee has a proven track record of not, and deliberately so, choosing not to prosecute any Scientologists or their agents for the crimes that they're clearly, blatantly committing. One of those people, for example, is the guy that brutally attacked William. charges were never brought forward by that person. They were never held to account. And all we got at the end of it was we found Detective Aludo had the audacity to assault William, even as William was trying to give him a recollection of what just happened to him. So instead of prosecuting even, say, Aludo for assault, they did nothing. They left William to figure it out and made sure that there was an example, and not the first one either, I might add, that there was an example of what would happen to you if you dare to speak out against any of their political backers. One of the first, ramp ups to the violence was actually two people. There was the bald guy out by the info center on Hollywood Boulevard who was carrying a knife and screaming right at Will's face. All he had was an arrest and never prosecuted. There was Patrick Perry, who literally let his dog charge at Chris without a Hellcat, and was never prosecuted for even the battery that he committed against Aaron Smith-Levin. But of course, Aaron Smith-Levin was, people say detained and arrested. He was jailed. You call it what you want. I don't care that he wasn't officially booked. He was jailed for 4 hours. It's utter crap what they did to Aaron. And it's disgusting that Hydee never prosecuted not only Patrick, but the officers, especially the bald singing officer. I forget his name because he's so damn stupid. But she never prosecuted him for malicious prosecution, for any number of, my God, there's a number of charges she could have gone after him or any of the other officers that day, but she never did. She never went after Philip Campos, who clearly assaulted Danny with his scooter. And that was utterly disgusting. She never went after Wendell, who committed one of the most obvious forms of assault, and she deliberately, I know for a fact through insider sources verified at the LAPD, that for sure she let Wendell walk away free via a statute of limitations for the indecent exposure he committed to a minor that day. And it was all caught on camera. And the reasoning for it given on the inside was, again, and I quote, because he did it next to a tree. So you can swing a machete and expose yourself as long as there's a tree nearby you and you're an agent of Scientology, you'll be fine. Just utterly disgusting. Then we move on, of course, to Cameron being brutally assaulted outside of La Poubelle. Those Scientology agents never got charged and prosecuted or held accountable. We have the skateboard guy who repeatedly, and was even on camera, taking money from Scientology to be one of their agents to harass Jessica Palmadessa and others. Never prosecuted at all. We have Michael, who just outside the Blue Building was unjustly arrested for doing nothing. Where an LAPD sergeant used excessive force, all because Michael was trying to get their attention and explain to them that they had been called on a fake Code 3 police call, and should have never even been made to show up in such a state of urgency and alarm, because there was no active shooter, no gun present at the scene at all. And this sergeant immediately escalated from 0 to 100 and ended up breaking and dislocating Michael's shoulder that he just had surgery on. No consequences for that officer whatsoever. And of course, conveniently, the gang of 6 officers from the LAPD that were present that day, none of them had body-worn cameras at all. If it wasn't for people live streaming, there would be no video footage of Michael's unlawful and brutal beatdown by officers with their excessive force. Then, of course, you have my case, where the very clear, blatant, selective prosecution, despite literal notes from the LAPD educating and admitting that they educated and informed Scientology that what they were doing with the nets was illegal, And the literal reports from the detective Ishmael Pinato admitting that there was no evidence of any sort of damage or vandalism. And the 4 officers who showed up at the behest of Scientology, right, all outlined in that article that I posted, all clearly showing that they came there at the personal behest of a private entity to serve out their will, lie for them, threaten arrests, threaten to assault people also, and not once ever getting prosecuted, despite the written complaints, despite the follow-up, and on the list goes. I mean, this is who Hydee Soto is, and this is her partner in crime. And I mean that literally in the sense that they're great criminals together. I mean, they sure are making sure that the real criminals of Los Angeles, the government officials and the corrupt law enforcement, get away with their acts, that there's no penalty for it. And they're happy to do so long as you're one of their political and backers and financiers. No problem. So this is the backdrop right now facing LA. And it's unfortunate because, like I was saying, I predict it's only going to get much worse. And I wish it wasn't this way, but people do need to understand. They should be clued in on what's really going on in LA, and this is the reality of it. And so, with that, I didn't want to go too long, but I'm gonna go ahead and copy link to the article I've been mentioning, so you guys have that for yourselves. Let me go ahead and open up my other tab here so you guys can check out that Substack article, read more into what I was just describing a moment ago. And go over here. Go ahead and put that. There's a link for the Substack article. Right, and I'll check the chat this time around. I've just been super busy trying to capture my notes. So I appreciate you guys' patience. I apologize for not reading the chat, but I just got to get through this. I really need to get through this and make sure that you guys have this information. So there's the link there. There's the link there. I'm going to go over to my other stream here and make sure that you guys have the link there as well. Okay, type in the other channel here. Make sure I clip that link in there as well. There's that link. So we have 1, 3, and then we have final link here for you guys over on this channel. All right, there we go. So there you go, guys. Check out that Substack article. It's got everything I mentioned in text format. So if you don't care to listen, just read that. And yeah, hope that helps. So all right, let's see if there's anything that people have any comments, any questions. Oh yeah, somebody said the old Asho building. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So I did not know that. So the old Asho building was across the street from the Rampart Police station on Temple Street. So I did not know that. I know where the station is. I go there there all the time. And yes, Tim Tallman, thank you. That was the dude, the freaking bald singer dude over at the Christmas parade that has a failed musical career. And yeah, Tim Tallman, old Timmy himself. God, what a disgusting POS that guy was. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Tim Tallman was the dude. But man, that's really interesting that the old Asho building was just across the original Astro building was just across the street from the Rampart police station. But I mean, is that really a surprise when you think about it, right? Scientology, and just like many other criminal enterprises, of course, is involved with other criminal enterprises like the LAPD. And so, of course, they would have used not only to shill Narconon, which they did with Lee Baca. Lee Baca received tons of money to sell that whole bullcrap program of Narconon. Okay, Lee Baca was quite infamous for that, in fact. And he's got tons of public press releases that you can see him just proudly standing by the nonsense that is Narconon. But of course, the Astro building would be next to the Rampart station. I mean, that's how they make trafficking of people, smuggling of drugs, and laundering the cash so much easier, as well as a hideaway spot for the same gangsters that are involved in those enterprises. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. So yeah, all right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions that people might have. But the last thing I wanted to leave you guys with is the real battle next. The next frontier is at the tackling the government corruption, because government corruption is the only way that criminal enterprises, be it this one or the next, can get away. If the government doesn't prosecute and is in fact taking money, then of course they have no incentive and no motive to actually change for the better, especially when people don't even know. Few people actually even understand, primarily due to the transient nature of the population of LA, but few people even understand that this is the history of people like Hydee Soto and Nathan Hochman and Lee Baca. Very, very, very few people understand that. But it's important, and that's what I want to bring attention to. It's very important that people understand that really, if you want to go viral nowadays, just show up to City Hall, man. Just show up and troll them. You know, the council members themselves are a giant criminal gang in and of themselves. I mean, you have Curran Price literally indicted on 10 counts of felony fraud for all the shit that he's involved with in conflicts of interest, families, and personal business stakes with the developers, and landing sweetheart deals as part of his power of as a council member. I mean, you can't make this shit up, but you got to understand that this cult crap, this is not unique at all to this cult. This is standard operating procedure. I don't see anybody as at all unique in that regard. This is the way that you truly take down criminal rackets. You got to go after the money, and the way you do that is you expose the people that are taking the money. And that's how you got to do it. That's how you have to do it. You have to show up and confront the government that is enabling and allowing this to happen. Show up and protest in front of the court buildings. Show up and protest in front of the city council buildings. There's a show that Laura and Serge did a while back was absolutely beautiful. And this Friday, the Gavin Potter case is supposed to have a hearing, I believe on a demurrer, but that's the time and place that you have to show up, because people really do listen to that, and people on the inside, be it other private lawyers to the sheriffs and to the judges, they listen to that shit truly. And I gotta tell you, the judges, both the state and federal ones, are goddamn fed up with the disgusting levels of corruption in LA at the city, at the county level, and overall the state level. They're absolutely fed up, but they can only do their job as a judge. They're not God, and all they can do is judge cases that come before them. But I'm telling you, from my time spent in these court buildings, they're fed up with it. They can't do anything as a judge, though, other than adjudicate cases before them. And that's how you gotta do it. go to the court building. Like, I would love to see this Friday another protest by Serge and Laura in front of that building, in front of the court building, especially with the Gavin Potter case. Fantastic opportunity. Like, what better chance and time could you ever ask for? It's right there. And so if you want to make your cause known, and you want to get the attention of the people literally adjudicating and litigating it, you got to go to the proper places. And the next frontier right now for this cause, and frankly any other cause at this point, is you got to go right to the government buildings and do it in a peaceful, calm, and very approachable manner. And I thought that the singing and the what was it? They had the child bride, the dress outfits on, the wedding outfits on. That was a fantastic display. That's how you got to do it. Very, very, very well done. And especially more so if you can invite families and make it feel welcoming and warm for them. That's how you do it. And, there's no need to shout or raise voices or otherwise look like an absolute idiot and look like a crazier person than the criminal racket that you're trying to expose. So all right, that's all I have for you guys, and see you all in the next one. Peace out, and make sure you check out that Substack article and follow me on Substack as well. All right, see ya.